Hi YouTube, my name's Jeff, and I'm the Veg Oil Guy. It's challenge time again, and there's 3 of us this time, and we're making a Klingon knife. Oh yes, I love Star Trek. I love all Star Trek, except Voyager prior to 7 of 9. But I adore Klingons, and so this challenge is right up my quadrant. I began with a sketch of what I thought this knife should look like, and this got printed, cut out, and glued onto some expanded foam. My hot wire cutter sliced through the bulk of the material, and I refined the shape by carefully sanding the edges. The drill press easily drilled 2 holes, and a sharp blade and a straight edge helped cut away this central channel. Using the hot wire cutter, I split the foam in 2 and marked out some lines to partially channel out. The Dremel makes easy work of this, and these channels reduce the amount of foam, allow for immediate gas flow, and dramatically improve the results. The 2 halves are glued back together, and I melted some ordinary candle wax to paint the edges. This hides the join and smooths out all the rough edges. When I made Mehrunes' razor, these sharp points on the guard didn't cast so well. So this time I decided to add quite large vents cum risers to these, and I cut out some square sections of expanded foam, but I sliced away a central core so the vents were open. I also cut these small connectors. They also have a hole running through them. I carefully drilled 4 small holes just deep enough to breach the internal channel. The connectors are glued directly on top of these holes, and larger connectors for my plaster feeders were also added. A small amount of tape seals off these holes for now. This flask is quite large, and I don't have that much sand, so here I place some scraps of timber inside the drag, purely to take up room. The sand was added on top of this and compacted well. The surface was scraped and flattened. The cope was added and screwed in place. A little tape was used to stop the sand clogging the drill holes. The foam pattern was centralised and placed on the firm flat surface. Green sand was sieved over everything until it was completely covered. At this point I very carefully used my fingertips and pressed down lightly all over to compress the sand just a little. I concentrated mostly on the edges, firming the sand so that it would hold the pattern more tightly. It's important not to squash the foam, as it will dent and damage, but fingers are very clever and can easily identify the edges where the sand is pushed a little more firmly. I revealed the central channel and compressed the sand inside this with the flat end of a drill bit. I then refilled with more sand and repeated the process several times to make sure this section was nicely formed. Then more sand was sieved on and finger pushed down, paying particular attention to the expanded foam connectors. I then took a piece of dowel and began to carefully tap the sand. If you remember your school day physics, pressure equals force over area, so a small stick like this can achieve a significant amount of pressure in a small area, and it also has the advantage of being much more controllable than a large ramming tool. Once I was convinced the sand was reasonably firm, I switched to the handle of my rubber mallet for a little more compression force. More sand was added, and the sand was compressed again until it was just below the level of the foam connectors. I was then able to carefully remove the tape and brush away any loose sand. It's worth taking a moment just to explain what's going on here. Remember, there are hollow channels throughout the pattern, and thanks to these holes we can blow into any one of these and air will come out of the others. You'll see how this works during the pour. The plaster feeders and foam vents were carefully added, and more sand was pushed between these for support. Food cans and sand surrounded the foam vents for even more support. In honesty, this cope isn't deep enough. A few more inches of sand are ideally needed to prevent the force of the metal from dislodging the feeders. To get around this, I decided to weigh everything down. But before that, I poked a few ventilation holes in the sand, pushing most of the way through the cope sand, but never contacting the foam pattern. A thin slice of fire brick bridged the two cans. A scrap of timber bridged the plaster feeders, but there was a small gap beneath this. So the timber was lifted and a little sand was added. Then the scrap of wood was pushed firmly back down. Now all four sections were weighed down by the scrap of wood. I placed some plastic containers on top of the wood. These were nice and heavy. But plastic. Did I mention that? Yes, plastic. With the paper covers removed, looking inside the feeder here, you can see a small hole in the foam. Everything was ready for the pour. My electric foundry had been cooking the metal nicely in the background, and this had been fluxed, degassed, dedrossed, and was ready for pour. Yes, hot stuff molten metal. Did I mention these containers are plastic? Watching again from this angle, notice how the smoke bellows out from all three vents almost immediately upon pouring the metal. That's what those channels are for. There's less restriction on the metal flow, there's less material to melt, and the gases had plenty of ways to get out. It's a simple and worthwhile technique, but it works. About half an hour later, I pulled the flasks apart. Success! Look at the black shape left in the drag. That's gases and heat safely passing through the sand, just as it should. Pulling away the cans and plaster feeders, it's clear to see nice reservoirs of metal helping to prevent shrinkage, especially to those thin guard sections. All in all, it was a nice looking cast. It was necessary to grind away the foam grain from the metal, which was easy enough. Then the sprues were cut away and the other side was ground before the blade was shaped and sanded. And then sanded some more, and sanded some more. What do you do when you haven't got a lathe? Well, you can drill a hole through the leftover sprue, add a sturdy nut and bolt to this, then clamp it firmly in a drill press. An angle grinder can be used to very carefully begin to grind away the edges. Klingon daggers traditionally have a spiked pommel, which is absolutely stupid in truth. Every time you reach for your knife, you'd stab yourself in the hand. So traditional or not, I couldn't bring myself to add spikes. But I did want a pommel, and the drill press was helping me turn one. To attach this, I decided to grind away most of the head of an 8mm bolt. Right from the beginning of this one, I'd planned on adding wooden handles. I shaped these according to my paper pattern and routed out the depth of the blade in one of them. Everything got bonded together with expanding glue, and then it was time to do some more sanding and give the handle some real shape. With a little stain added to the handle, the pommel was bolted on to make a nice skull splitter. And that made a finished Klingon dagger. And here it is, my Klingon dagger, and to be honest, I'm thrilled with it. The handle may seem a little large, but a significant part of this is the crossguard, and more importantly, I designed this knife for me. It's my toy, replica, so it's right for my hand. If you want a small handle, you're going to have to make your own, but for me this one felt great. It seemed glued into my palm. The skull splitter would certainly do its job, but in a mythical, wholly fictional way that is nothing to do with the replica, which is not a toy or a real knife. Now don't forget to check out the videos of my two pals Big Stack T and SW Dweeb. They've also made Klingon knives using their own techniques, and even though these are probably a bit wimpish, not chunky and meaty like a real Klingon warrior's blade, it's worth having a look at their efforts and picking up on their methods. Because, in all seriousness, that's what this challenge is all about, guys. 3 challengers doing the same thing, but each doing it in their own way. Your way might not be my way, it might not be Big D's way, it might not be Perry's way, but it might be a way that incorporates a little bit from each of us, and as long as it works for you, then it's right. Whee! So that's it for this challenge, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please like it. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already, and don't forget to add your comments for everyone to see. So check out those other videos, guys. Take care, and Qapla!